Is there a trans terror cell operating within the U.S.? And can a number of homicides be pinned on this alleged terror cell? Our first guest tonight says soberly yes to both questions. He reports, quote, an elderly Pennsylvania couple was murdered in a double homicide in January 2023. An 82-year-old California man was brutally stabbed to death on January 17, 2025. A U.S. Border Patrol officer was shot dead on January 20th, 2025 in Vermont. The cases are all allegedly linked, end quote. And he's surprised there isn't more media attention on the story. Joining us now to discuss his chilling and frankly tragic findings is Andy Ngo, an independent journalist and a senior editor for The Post-Millennial. He's also the author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Andy, thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Great. So there's a lot here that you've uncovered, but first, to kind of get ourselves situated, can you walk us through the basic breakdown of who this main pair is, or I guess I should say was, since one of them is now deceased, and how it culminated into the tragic shooting of the Border Patrol agent that we all heard about on Trump's inauguration day?
So the story has now reached a point where it can no longer be ignored by the mainstream media. We are seeing reporting by AP, San Francisco Chronicle, and others about how the killing of the CBP officer was not isolated, allegedly, according to prosecutors. It's linked now to at least 5 other deaths. So the story is there was a trans duo on Inauguration Day who were allegedly involved in a deadly encounter with a Border Patrol officer in Vermont near the Canadian border. Initially, at first, the focus, at least in conservative media, was that the German national who died in the shootout may have been here on an expired H-1B visa. That's still a bit unclear, but what's emerged as we've learned more about the female suspect, who's also transgender identifying, who was apprehended alive, is that both of them allegedly have links to a California-based transgender group, some call it a cult, that are allegedly involved in multiple homicides across the U.S. spanning back the last few years. And some of these killings are really horrific. The most recent one happened on the 17th of January, involving an 82-year-old man in the Bay Area who was set to testify as a key witness in a murder and attempted murder trial against members of this group. The suspect who was just apprehended and charged over the alleged assassination of this elderly man is the fiance of the female who's apprehended in Vermont. And if you read the court documents, the weapons that were used in this shootout allegedly belong to an individual who is also transgender and is the child of a double homicide that happened in Pennsylvania. So there's been multiple people who have been killed. Several members of the group have died in their attacks on other people as well. So the story is really big. It's not being covered accurately because one big glaring omission in all the headlines, if you read in legacy media, is that nobody's reporting out that all of these individuals are transgender identifying in some way, and their extremist ideology includes aspects of transhumanism and, of course, transgenderism.
As you talk about the Vallejo man in California who was murdered quite recently, he had been attacked by members of this group before, right? I think maybe over rent. He lost his eye. So there you see him with both of his eyes. The other picture he showed of him, he was missing an eye, and then unfortunately he was then finally killed. But could you talk about that case a little more? Because
yeah, the story's confusing, I understand, and I've been trying to simplify it as best as I can, but it really, you can't, because it involves so many people. All of them have aliases, they have fake names, they have so-called dead names, so the legal name is different from what they identify as, and they're all transgender. So the case of Curtis Lint, that's the 82-year-old man who was brutally hacked to death and had his throat slit in the Bay Area on the 17th of January. He had survived narrowly another attempt on his life by members of this group in November of 2022. So during the pandemic, for several years, he had rented out his property, a plot of land, to this group, and they lived in box trucks on his property. And according to neighbors and what local media is reporting, was very bizarre in what they were doing. They would walk around wearing gas masks, and they set up solar panels. He said that he was ambushed in an attack by 3 members of this group, 3 transgender members, and they impaled him, and he had a firearm for self-defense. And lucky that he did, because he shot back and he killed one of them, a transgender person named Amir Borhanian, also known as Emma, and injured one of the others, and one was uninjured. So the 2 surviving alleged attackers, assailants, have an upcoming trial in April for attempted murder and other felony crimes. And he was the sole witness to that attack and also the survivor, and he's been killed.